Yep. That's how it works. That's exactly how it works. That's like being Jesus. That's like if you're learning to be baby Jesus. So if you were baby Jesus at like 10 years old, so you're Jesus and you're like 10 years old, and somebody walks up to you and says, I want blank from the power of God. Then baby Jesus has to say, well, you're not a very good person. So as a person that's not a very good person, one, you might hurt the power of God and do something bad after I give you something good. So you have to think about that. As Jesus, you have to think about this. So let's pretend you're Jesus. As Jesus, when I give you my power of God powers, are you going to do something bad right after I do something with my powers for you that's very good? Because if Jesus gives his powers to somebody and then they turn around and do something bad, that creates more cancer kids, more emergencies at the emergency rooms. It creates bad devastational harm because the power of God is being used for bad or in the reality of bad. So you have to say, well, I really need you to be a really good person that is very, very serious about being a very, very good person. Because I really need to make sure you don't do the wrong thing after I give you a miracle or after I give you money or after I give you something. Because if you do the wrong thing after I give you the power of God as Jesus, you could be creating the most catastrophic, devastational harm with the power of God being used bad. So I have to really make sure you're a really good person. So I pretty much can guarantee you wouldn't hurt the family of God like that. And you wouldn't hurt the future of innocent or other people like that. So see, you want a good enough good person. Why? Because after a good enough good person gets a miracle, if they think about being bad or doing wrong again, they'll feel bad. They'll have a conscience about it. They'll maybe say, Jesus, take away your powers. I did the wrong thing after you gave me a miracle, and I don't want the whole world and more to die just because I'm gross, and I want to do something bad after you gave me a miracle. See, you're looking for the best good people that just want to perpetuate the power of God in only what is beautiful and good and right. You don't want to give the power of God to people who easily do bad, because it only perpetuates bad things. You cannot do bad and have it not belong to bad devils, bad demons, and bad evil god giants. So when you do bad, it will only go to the powers and the forces of bad. When you do good, it will only go to the power and forces of good. So you have to be a good enough person that you're not going to contribute to bad things, because God doesn't want to be connected to bad things. And see, that's why, because it just creates more and more damage and harm to everybody else, for anybody else. When you get a miracle from Jesus, if you do bad, it creates really scary karma, really bad things, really bad nightmare accidents that would normally never happen. So see, it's hard for Jesus to say, I'm sorry, but you're not worthy. But that's why Jesus had to say that people weren't worthy when they weren't worthy. When they did not qualify for the miracle, they would not get the miracle. When they did not deserve the miracle, they could not get the miracle. Because Jesus's powers have to answer for all of that. Because also, Jesus would never tell you this, but when Jesus works a miracle, every single thing that Jesus's powers do, Jesus gets graded by every god every year. So gods go to court and think about everything Jesus did with his powers, and whether the power of good stayed with the power of good and benefited only good, or whether Jesus put out any powers that benefited bad. Well, Jesus put out power of God. And in Jesus's power of God, it benefited bad about 12% one year. And gods were devastated. So it's very scary, because you want to feel bad for people, but you really need to be really, really smart about whether it's worth putting your powers into them, or whether they will ultimately screw over good and the power of good, and whether it's not worth it to even help them, because they'll probably just become bad or gross people again anyway. And that's the sad thing. That's the sad thing. There will always be someone in prison that ended up in a medical emergency. In prison, in a medical emergency, they promised God anything. So they got a miracle. Then they got out of prison. They were no longer in medical emergency. And they went and did really gross bad things again. And created quite a nightmare for God to be graded about and have to be treated bad about. And that's another thing. God is more generous than Jesus, but he gets in more trouble than Jesus. So God has legendarily helped prison inmates that really, 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 truly at that moment really want to be somebody else. But then they just want to go back and be bad or gross. And God gets in a lot of trouble. And all gods go to court about all gods. And at the top, I go to court about all gods. And I even take myself to court. I make a perfected court standard and put myself through it like a computer spin. So I work with all gods to make sure all intelligence is in my court systems of pure perfection of good and pure intelligence. And I must walk through that court system also to make it and get my grades and figure out who I am or what I deserve to be. Because really every God needs to keep each other accountable. Because if God is not good at the top, we have nothing, right? And if we have no somebody out there that fights for good, we have nothing, right? But yeah, it's a hard day when Jesus has to say, I'm sorry, but you don't qualify for a miracle. But he did it. They didn't put it in the Bible. I don't know why they didn't put it a lot in the Bible, but they really didn't. I guess they just want to celebrate that miracles are such a miracle. And when people get good things, it's such an amazing miracle to watch people get good things. And I'm not going to lie. I'd rather turn water to liquor all day than to deal with bad people or even know they exist. I'd rather turn water to wine and honor Jesus all the time than to even think twice about bad people walking the earth or that they exist. And I would give anything to turn water into gold, but I have not found a human that perfect and that worthy yet. Than to think about the stupid, gross people that walk around and think they're so slick to be gross, like they're going to get away with it.